What's up, y'all? This is Zach. We live in corporate, and listen, the break room is on its mid-season break, but we still got, heat for your head top. We just kind of had in the tuck, right? So, what you're listening to right now are older episodes of the break room back when we were just a live web show. Make sure you check us out. Share this with your friends. I don't know if there's any other podcast that has multiple Black psychologists and psychiatrists, all of them degreed and certified, talking about the implications of racism on Black folks at work, right? From a mental health, mental wellness perspective. I really want y'all to check it out. Excited that you're here. Like I said, make sure to tell somebody about it and enjoy this episode.
Hey y'all, and welcome to the break room, where we are dedicated to talking about Black mental health, specifically in the workplace. I am Dr. LaWanda Hill, one of the co-hosts of the show, and I will allow my wonderful co-host to introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Dr. LaWanda. My name is Dr. Jide Bama-Shigben. I'm a professor of psychology at Cal State Long Beach. I'm a health psychologist, and I'm a dad, and we're really excited to have this episode today.
Yes, I'm super excited for this episode, y'all, because I have been in a state of rage following the anti-Asian, racially motivated, hate-motivated crime that occurred in Atlanta on Tuesday. So I'm like, I cannot wait to come to the break room to talk about this, because I think it's so related and so on par with what we address. But before we hop into it, I'm going to try to pace myself. We may have some new listeners, some new people. So we want to give you an overview of what the break room is, who we are, what we do, and how we'll spend our time today. And encourage you to engage us in the comments, ask questions, be in the mix. So the break room is a webinar that's part of the Living Corporate series, where there's 4 of us that come together weekly Thursdays at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we talk about all things Black mental health in the workplace. And living in a very anti-Black, white terrorist world, we have topics galore, right? So we usually open up with the T. What is the T? What's happening? What's going on with the current events? Because we know current events impact our health and our mental health. And then we move into our topic. And tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about the fact that the body keeps the score. We're going to really unpack what that is. After we talk about that specific topic, we ask that the audience engage us in comments and questions. You can always write into us. I'm hoping Dr. Jade has the email address, and we'll talk about how you can write into us for questions. Mm-hmm. And then, after we take those questions, we go to the last nerve, which is one of my favorite parts of our show, where we talk about what has gotten on our last nerve for the week. And we give ourselves 60 seconds. We sometimes go over. The 60 seconds. About a 90-second rant about what's been getting on our damn last nerve. And then we wrap up. So that's how we spend our time. I'm super excited today to hop into the topic about the body keeping the score, which is going to talk about, the psychological and physiological impact of white toxicity. Okay? That's what we're going to unpack today. But before we do, let's pop us off with the T, Dr. Today. What we got? What's the T?
Yes. So today, our T, we're going to spill the tea, and we're going to talk about a recording that came out in the last week of Kirk Franklin. So Kirk Franklin is a nationally famous, probably world famous gospel artist, right?
I say world.
World famous. He makes incredible music. I love, Kirk Franklin's music, and I'm sure many people do. But a recording came out recently from his son that put it on Instagram of, how do you call it? An argument between them, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
It got real between them.
It got really, really, really heated, and there's been a lot of talk about what was said and, Black folks' reaction to it, right? With regard to what happened, right? So he's on the phone and, Kirk Franklin's gospel artist, but we heard some language, right? And I quote, I wrote this down beforehand because I wanted to make sure, so I quoted. He called him a bitch ass. He said, "I will put my foot in your ass." Sorry, I'm saying it like this. It's more funny this way. And he said, "I will break your neck, nigga."
Oh,
okay. Yes.
I ain't heard
Yes.
it, but okay.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
Kirk went there. He went there. Okay.
To his son, who, and this is important, his son is 33. Okay, his son is not like a child. His son is a grown man. And that's what's happened. And there's been lots of like debate about, is that type of language appropriate? Right? Is it appropriate for him to talk to his son like that? A lot of people have say, well, my parents talk to me like that all the time. Like, what's the problem, right? So, Dr. Luana, what were your thoughts on it?
Okay, so I didn't hear it, but my best friend called me and told me about it, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm okay. Like, they grown ass men. Because from what I hear, the way he opens it up is he's like, let me talk to you in a language, I'm paraphrasing that you can understand. So like, if you don't get it this way, let me talk to you in this way, right? So for me, I'm going to go ahead and conclude or assume that he tried to get through to him with, none expletives, and he didn't. And so he went in on him. And I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it unless he really intended to put his foot in his ass or break his neck and all that. I don't support physical abuse or anything like that. But like, that's how Black people talk to each other sometimes, like that's how people talk. So I felt like people were overreacting, maybe because he was a gospel artist. But from what I'm hearing from you and just like taking it in, I'm like, people know that their parents talk to them like that all the time.
I think that's a fair perspective. I saw it, and I felt so I'll say part of the conversation was about, you're not going to cancel Kirk Franklin, right? And my whole thing is, we're not talking about canceling, we're not talking about cancel culture, because it doesn't actually exist. All these things, we'll talk about that another time, right? But I will say, I think Kirk Franklin probably wants to have that conversation back. I'm a father, I have 2 kids.
Okay.
I've said things that I'm like, what? Upon reflection, I wish I could take that back. I wish I could phrase that better, right? Is Kirk Franklin actually going to beat his son's ass? I don't know, right? I don't know. But that kind of conversation, I feel like he could have handled it better as the adult, right? Because no matter what age you are, your parent is still your parent. Your parent is still your parent. Yeah. At the same time, that's how people talk. Right. That's how me and my dogs talk when we're playing basketball with each other, all these different kinds of things. So there's a lot of cultural aspects of it, but also as a parent, you
feel like he may have lost his cool.
I think he lost his cool. And that doesn't make you a bad parent. That makes you a human.
Right. In that moment, you were like really emotional. So it sounds like maybe he may want to redo because he's kind of calmed down a little bit.
Exactly.
And don't want to kind of have the same.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's not the end of the world, though.
I did hear people say, that's funny. They're like, we're not canceling Kirk. And somebody said, that's on Melodies from Heaven.
I
was like, we're not canceling Kirk, and that's on Melodies from Heaven. So y'all can forget about it. So I feel that. I guess a good way to think about it is like, we understand culturally it is normative, right? Like at least for some cultures. Some part of Black culture. We're not a monolithic culture, but for some parts of Black culture, it is normalized. And at the same time, it's like he may have lost his cool and he may want to call that back.
Yeah. But it's not the end of the world. He wouldn't be the first parent to curse his kid.
He's just the only one. But one of he happens to be famous and he was caught on tape.
And he was caught on tape. Exactly.
He was outed on tape by his son doing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
that's our tea, y'all. We like to start off with something light, some tea, so that we can kind of keep our ear to the streets. We like to stay relevant before we hop into the topic. And I guess this is a perfect time to pivot, to tonight's topic. I want to talk about the physiological and psychological impact of white toxicity, right? And how the body ultimately keeps the score with that. Now, I feel like this is so timely, y'all, because we know that on Tuesday in Atlanta, Georgia, a white terrorist who shall remain nameless decided to do what whiteness and white toxicity does in its inability to manage its own impulses, its own challenges, its own shortcomings that is a part of the human experience, decided to, externalize that and take lives of people, right? He wanted to blame. And opened gunfire in Atlanta, killing 8 people, 6 of which were of Asian descent.
In 1 hour.
In 1 hour, and women. And was on his raggedy ass way to Florida to kill more people. Okay? We know that there has been a spike in anti-Asian racism. There's been a spike in violence against Asian Americans since COVID-19, since 45's presidency, and him inciting that. And this is predictable. Arguably, this was predictable, and it has come to a head.
Thank you so much for saying that. 45 really has incited this. I really feel it's important to stress that. The previous person in office has incited this type of violence.
And made it acceptable. And made it socially acceptable, and just activated people's own internal hatred and their own, evilness, right? So he's a culprit in this. So when this happened, this went down on Tuesday, and I began to see the news coverage already beginning to spin the narrative to humanize him and the victims, right? The police officer went as far as to say he was having a bad day, right? They were, talking about his sex addiction, right? Which is not a thing, by the way. They were talking about giving all these reasons and rationale and not calling it a racially motivated crime. They gave him the opportunity to write his own narrative, right? Because he said it wasn't racially motivated. Yeah. And so because he said it, even though 6 of the 8 victims were Asian and he targeted them, then that must be true because whiteness gets to write his own narrative.
And can I just add to that?
Absolutely.
Nobody really took the time to interview the Asian people who are around as well. So there are reports from Asian news outlets which pointed out that literally he screamed, "I will kill all Asians," before he went along and did this, right? And you're allowing him to set this narrative, right, about, well, it wasn't racially motivated. It's really upsetting. So
it's a bunch of bullshit. That's what it is. It's a bunch of bullshit. And as it began to unfold, I remember just feeling rage and like a physical reaction, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, like a physical, visceral reaction to the news coverage, to his audacity, to the fact that lives have been lost. And then I began to think about, this is the impact of white terrorism. I'm not calling it white supremacy anymore. I'm calling it white toxicity. I'm calling it white terrorism. This is the psychological impact of white terrorism on people, right? And how, these crimes that targeted Asian Americans or people of Asian descent can activate our own trauma as Black folks, right? And the body literally keeps the memory and holds the story and keeps the score of what has happened, right? So I want to unpack that today. So I want to, pay my respects to the lives that were lost.
8 people.
8 people. And my prayers, my thoughts, my heart goes out to that family, those families that are beginning to grieve and deal with the shock and the aftermath of all of this. My heart just really goes out to them. And so I want to just take a moment to acknowledge that and spend some time today talking about how that impacts Black folks specifically, because we still got to go to work, right? This happened and people still have to show up at work. So when I say white toxicity, okay, the impact of white, when you think about something that's toxic, y'all, right? I've looked for research on this and I'm like, oh, there's nobody, probably people being polite. They haven't really written about white toxicity, probably because they're still calling it white supremacy. But toxic means something that causes harm. It's like legit poisonous, okay? It eats away at structurally, at something, of a thing, breaks it down, can kill it over time. And whiteness in and of itself is toxic in a lot of ways. And that toxicity has psychological, physiological impacts on people. And specifically, for the sake of our show, at work too, right? Because these events happen and it just activates, to me, white toxicity in the workplace. So there's a lot of ways in which white toxicity manifests. Okay?
That was this anti-Asian shooting was just like the worst extreme example of it, right? Because people are dead, right? But it manifests itself every day. Every single day.
Say that again. That is only one example. Like, that's an extreme version of it, but it manifests itself every day, y'all. And I want you to understand it and be able to recognize it. That's what I hope you take away from the show today, to be able to recognize when it's manifested, because it does have a physiological and psychological impact on who we are. That, violence, extreme levels of violence, lethal violence is one manifestation of it. But we saw other manifestations of it happen on the news channels that we see at work. Let me help you out about what that looks like. Number one, whitewashing. That is a manifestation of white toxicity. When I say whitewashing, I know y'all know what I'm talking about. It's the way white people take a story and they spin it, and they make it more comfortable. What do we see? Oh, he was having a bad day. When have you ever seen anybody who's not white have an issue where there's violence involved and somebody gives the explanation that he was having a bad day? Or that he had a sex addiction, right? So now we're making an excuse for him. We're making an excuse for his behavior. Whitewashing. We're going to change the narrative. Christopher Columbus came over and discovered America, as opposed to he savagely raped, and took land that was not his from the native indigenous people who were already here. It's called whitewashing. And we see it all the time. Retelling stories, rechanging narratives. This manifests at work in a lot of different ways. It's like, we're such and such, they found another opportunity, so they left the organization, or you pushed them out. Right?
Yep.
It's lies. It's lies, and it's deception, and it's toxic. And when you take it in, just like any poison, when you take it in daily, it begins to have an impact on you.
Yep. And they whitewash all our heroes too. Same thing. Martin Luther King, whitewashed. Martin Luther King, whitewashed. In terms of all his thoughts, all his speeches, right? The white people that Martin Luther King think of, right, is not the actual Martin Luther King.
No,
right? Who was a radical, right? Who called out white people and white moderates, right? So the Martin Luther King that white people talk about is the one who wanted everybody to be together without, skin color coming in between, right? That's an example of whitewashing.
Or they want to talk about, I remember seeing on Twitter one time where this white woman literally was going back and forth with his daughter about what his mission was. Like, your dad would be so, first of all, how you going to tell this woman what her dad's true purpose and mission was? Like, that is a classic example of the audacity of whiteness and how it becomes so fucking toxic, okay?
Yep.
So they begin to rewrite this narrative about MLK as being so peaceful and wanting to center love. And first of all, there can be no love and peace without justice. And you cannot have justice unless you tell the truth and face the truth. And that is something that whiteness, by and large, have a very hard time doing, is being honest, right? And facing and telling the truth for what it is. And so this level of toxicity, y'all, it's so there, like the air you breathe. Right. And I want to name it because I don't think that we know that we're being impacted in the workplace. We know that there's a challenge. We know that there's something that's making us awful. We can't really name it. And we don't know why. And whitewashing is definitely one of those things. Okay. That is white toxicity, a manifestation of white toxicity in the workplace that makes us have a physiological impact. Another impact is gaslighting, y'all. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is another manifestation of white toxicity that basically is when, white people by and large and people who are white aligned, who've internalized these white dominant views, will play this psychological warfare and dismiss the reality of what is, making you question yourself psychologically. Like, I don't know, for instance, let's say you are impacted by the events that happen in Atlanta and you show up at work and you are like, people are just moving on with their day, and you're having a reaction and everybody's kind of looking at you or dismissing it like it doesn't matter, right? Or like it didn't happen, or like you shouldn't be as impacted by it, right? And when this happens, you kind of begin to psychologically question yourself, like, well, am I overreacting? Or why are you so angry about this? Or why are you so mad about this? Or we don't understand why there's such a problem, right? It is an active dismissal, right? It is an active dismissal of what's really happening. That usually happens to Black folks and people of color, that creates a physiological and psychological impact, right? So when we think about like the ways in which this toxicity shows up, it is most definitely this whitewashing narrative. It is most definitely this gaslighting, and that begins to wear and tear us over time. So do you have any examples for you today of like gaslighting at work?
Absolutely. Imagine being in a workspace, okay, a workplace, and you're a Black person in the workplace, maybe maybe one of a few, okay, and you notice that other people are moving up. They're moving up, and there's nothing inherently wrong with other people moving up. That's what you're supposed to do in an organization. If you're doing good work and you're there, you move up. But you notice other people are moving up. You ask questions about why you're not moving up, And it's now you got to wait for something else. Oh no, you got to wait for X. Oh, you got to wait for Y. Oh well, it's a funding thing. Oh, it's an X issue, right?
It's a time
until
issue.
that one day where like the absolute worst person in the office gets a promotion, right? And you're like, no way, right? You know, the son of the boss, right? The white man in the office, whatever. Somebody just gets a promotion, and you're like, no, actually, this whole time I was waiting on you, right? Because I'm thinking you're my boss. This is a good faith effort. My time will come when it's time, right? But actually, you were never going to let me move up, right? You know, and that happens a lot. That happens a lot. I went to graduate school at UCLA. I can pull a Black grad student out of any department, chemistry, political science, XYZ, and they'll have a similar story, right? There's no more funding. There's no more X. Well, it's not the right time. Well, no, that's just gaslighting.
Or that's
not the truth.
It's not the truth, right? And at the end of the day, that's what gaslighting does. It distorts the truth and the reality of what is that you know is rooted in anti-Blackness, that you know is rooted in a lot of privilege, nepotism in a lot of instances, or mediocrity, but it refuses to acknowledge the reality of what's happening, right? And when you don't do that, that fucks with your psyche.
Yep.
You know, like you're gonna say that this is a funding issue when y'all found funding for random things, you know, or this is going to take so much time, but you can put time and energy behind things that you really, really value. So this gaslighting is another way in which white toxicity manifests, y'all. And it is problematic on so many different levels, and it begins to eat away at you. And I think the third one, before we start talking about the impact, like the psychological impact of what I want to name as toxicity, is this is a common one that I think doesn't get a lot of airtime, and it's this white niceness, right? It's toxic, right? It's this white niceness that manifests as I'm going to be nice and I'm going to be kind to you so that I don't have to address any bigger issues or deeper issues or acknowledge my privilege or acknowledge the ways in which I am unfairly or unduly benefiting from my whiteness. And if I'm nice to you, that'll make all that go away, right? And we don't have to address any issues, right? I don't have to give up any level of power. I don't have to be uncomfortable in any way as long as I'm nice.
Toxicity with a smile.
Toxicity with a smile.
I'm not going to hire you.
But I'll be nice, and I'm going to be kind about it, and I'm going to be polite. But I'm not going to really deal with any of the real issues, right? Because I know that what you face is real, but I'm just going to pretend like I don't. And so sometimes I feel like, not sometimes, most of the time, white niceness is weaponized, right? It's weaponized in a way of, well, I can't believe that you would feel angry with me. I can't believe that you would have a strong reaction to me or be mad at anything that I'm doing or not doing because I'm just being so kind. I don't give a fuck about you being kind. I want you to do what you need to do to address structural racism and anti-Blackness. And I don't, be rude. I'd rather you be rude than be kind. And I see it all the time. It's like racism with a smile is the perfect way to do it. Like, can you think of any examples today of like, that right, nice? I'm
having like flashbacks right now. And it's you know, I'm not gonna lie. It even is a little painful, you know, to try to go back and think about these things, right? But, you know, people will smile in your face. Believe it, right? People will smile in your face, okay? And then go in whatever office and, you know, backstab you. You know, I recently watched an example I could think of. I recently watched, don't judge me. I watched the What Men Want with Taraji P. Henson. You know, please don't judge me. I watched it, and there was an example of that. You know, so she could read minds, and she had a coworker who she thought was like against her, right? And she read his mind, and she found out, no, actually, he voted for me to move up to partner because he's a lawyer or something, right? It was the boss who she always thought was on her side.
Yep.
It was that one who was the one who was not voting her in, right?
Yep.
Once again, I'll do it right there with a smile on my face, right? And I will not let you move up, but I don't want you to think that it's me.
Yeah.
That's part of the niceness, right? I don't want you to think that it's me. I don't want you to know that it's me.
Because I want to hoard this power, right? Or as Dr. Nikki said, it's that sweet prejudice, right? I'm going to be sweet to you and I'm going to be kind to you. And I'm going to agree. I'm going to come after the meeting. That's the people who come to you after the meeting is over and they let you struggle in the meeting and say everything you say.
You were so brave.
You were so brave, and that was so nice of you. Oh my God, that took so much strength. And you sat your ass there and didn't say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And you think because you were kind enough to, it's performative kindness is what I call
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
It's performative kindness that maintains inequity and maintains distress. And I think the paradox, like the psychological paradox for folks is like, but should I be mad because they're so nice? You know, or they're always bringing me coffee, or they're always, you know, affirming me, and they're always doing X, Y, Z. So I guess I shouldn't be that mad at them. And that is that. I think that's the psychological impact that begins to have on you. And you're wondering, like, well, what's the problem? Like, they don't dislike me. First of all, racism is not a good, bad binary, right? It is structural, it is action oriented, and it's systematic. So you can be nice to me all you want and then not diversify leadership. Or you can be nice to me all you want, but then there's no money in the budget to be able to promote me or pay me what is due to me, and you are still racist at the same time.
Right.
So I think these three pieces, and I could go on and on and on about whiteness and white toxicity because it is just very nuanced and toxic at its core. But I find that in this particular week with things that have happened, and just, you know, as a psychologist, y'all, I hear people deal with these insidious acts of whiteness in their workplace, in the environment. I'm a psychologist at Stanford. I also have a private practice. And so people who are in tech, and Facebook, Google, Instagram, all of them, anti-Black, every single one of them. And the toxicity of the whiteness and the ways in which it shows up, if you don't have a language for it, y'all, if you can't name it, it's hard to understand its impact, right? And so I wanted to be able to, go ahead, I wanted to be able to provide.
I was going to ask you a question, and we might get to this later today or another episode. What do you do about it?
Which part?
You know, if you're in a situation where, like, oh, this is a toxic white environment, right? Like, what do you do as somebody who works there?
Okay, we're going to get to it. I want to talk about the impact of it, and then I do want to I want to center our mental health in all of it.
Okay.
Because in a sea, if you're drowning in a sea of white toxicity, which is a lot of people's reality, we don't want you to leave this show without having some tips and tools about how to survive that. So I'm going to talk about that. Life rafts. But before we do, I want you to talk to us a little bit about, now that we know how white toxicity can manifest in whitewashing, in gaslighting, in that white niceness, right? In that white performative whiteness. Talk to us about the psychological, physiological impact of it.
I mean, so it's not a question as to whether white toxicity and racism and all these things impact the physical and mental health of Black people and other people of color, you know, in the country. It's a matter of how and to what extent. You know, that's really the question, right? It's not if, it's how. Our body has a job. You know, I don't know if we think about it this way, but our body has a job to protect us, right? When something happens in the environment, our body says, okay, let me level you out, right? It's kind of cold, let me warm you up. It's kind of hot, let me cool you down, right? That's what our body does physically, but also psychologically, you know? So there are so many different examples of white toxicity, okay, that I could point to. I think the most recent example of white toxicity is this COVID-19 pandemic and the handling of everything that went along with it, okay? As you pointed out earlier with the previous person who was the president of the United States, he was responsible for the anti-Asian violence we just recently saw, but also just the entire handling of it, you know, from beginning to end, the way Black people are treated in the hospitals, the way that Black people are getting skipped over for vaccines, it's all an example of white toxicity.
And even the stigma of Black people not even wanting to get vaccinated because of historical distrust in the healthcare, all of it.
And actually, you know, there's this idea that Black people don't want to get vaccinated. The people who don't want to get vaccinated the most are white Republicans. By the way, to be clear, there's really no difference between the average Black person and the average white person in terms of wanting to get vaccinated. It's really the white Republicans who say they don't want to do it, but that's neither here nor there. Okay. You know, but white toxicity. Okay. So COVID-19 lowered the life expectancy in this country. Overall, it lowered it a year. For Black people, it lowered our life expectancy by 3 years. For Hispanic people, it lowered their life expectancy by 2 years. Okay. White toxicity. All right. There's research showing that in places, this is just crazy to me. In places, okay, because Google tracks all the information, right?
Of course. The cookies.
And they know what you're searching. They know when you're searching it. They know where you're searching it from. When they see in certain places where people are searching the N word more often, okay, and usually they mean the N word with a hard R, not with the A, right? Because that's the distinction with the hard ER, right? They find that Black people in those areas have an 8% increase in mortality. An 8% increase in mortality in comparison to white people, which translates, because I want to put this into numbers you can understand, 30,000 more deaths a year.
Because of white toxicity.
Because of white toxicity. Just from knowing who types in the N word in Google, right? You know, telomeres. They're on our chromosomes. They're like shoelace caps, right? And they help us. They're associated with aging. So much research has shown that Black people have shorter telomeres, right? And that's something that leads to worse health and, you know, higher likelihood of dying, right? And you can even see those changes really, really early on in life, right? Because the differences between Black people and white people start prenatally, truly, you know, because of racism and white toxicity in the United States, okay? Yeah. Recently, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, okay? They recently had a podcast with some white doctors, okay? And they posted on Twitter with this great headline, okay? Are you ready for this headline?
Give it to me. Wait. Let me take a sip.
Okay, take a sip. All right. You know, me too. Okay, and this is a country where Black women have the highest rates of infant mortality and, maternal mortality, right? I'm reading this right now. No physician is racist. So how can there be structural racism in healthcare?
No physician is racist. Listen to the bullshit, y'all. And the white toxicity. Listen to the gaslighting. Listen to the whitewashing. Mm-hmm. No physician. No physician. Even hell, I would even say even the white niceness, right? No physician is racist. So how could there be structural?
It's all three.
It's all three in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And everybody's like, in this country, right? The same country that treats fat people poorly, right? That doesn't listen to them when they have a problem, that doesn't treat Black people well, doesn't treat poor people well, treats homeless people as if they're disposable. That country, there's no physician that's racist.
First of all, let me break it down for it to forever be broken. Okay? Like he said on Love Jones, I believe. Mm-hmm. Racism is an act. Anytime there's multiple races at the table, right? And let's just take this whole idea of healthcare in infant mortality rate or maternal rate of death. Mm-hmm. If there are more people within one race represented in those deaths than others, and they happen to be disproportionately Black or disproportionately Latinx or disproportionately Indigenous Native folks, racism is at play. One race is being favored, having a higher rate of life expectancy. One race is not. Like there is something racist about that because it is centering, elevating one race while marginalizing and oppressing another. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is a fundamental fact. We got to get beyond this good, bad, binary. Yep. No person thinks they're racist or admits to being racist, but yet the data suggests differently. So if you see that the rates of mortality for Black women, for instance, who are, maternal and moving through the maternal process are higher, there is a level of racism at play. Why is that not happening for whites, Latinx, Asians, you name it? Okay? And so then, just for the ignorant ass doctors who don't get it, that is racism. So therefore, if it's happening structurally, there's something inherent in the process that creates the disproportionate outcome. Mm-hmm. Even in their biases in evaluating these women, in understanding these women's body, in understanding the ways in which they carry children to term or not to term, in ways in which they assess. Structurally, there's something that's being missed about a particular race that's leading to a negative outcome. You idiot. I'm sorry, I had to give that because that
huge idiots. No, thank you. That's exactly what it is, and that's just to showcase this is what we're up against. Right? This is what we're up against. Like the JAMA, I can't really explain how big JAMA is. Do you know what I'm saying? JAMA is like the New York Times of medical journals.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And this is a representation of the medical system gaslighting you.
Yep.
telling you that structural racism doesn't exist.
Yep.
I mean, racism doesn't exist. So how could it be structurally racist?
Yep. So that's what we're up against. So we have a question that was asked previously, and I'm going to read it to you because I want you to answer this one. Okay.
Go for it.
This isn't me writing it, but obviously, I am a Black female, fairly young, 30-ish, professional that feels that the excellence that is inherent in others, that is inherent in how I show up, often makes others, even other Black folk in power, uncomfortable. Any advice on how to unpack that? Not wanting to lose myself, but also not wanting to make others uncomfortable.
I would say for the person who said it, you should say a little bit more about what it means for you to make people uncomfortable, right? Like, what is that about? Because I can share my reactions to it, right? Like, I think that, first of all, because of white toxicity, I think black people, let's just start broadly with Black people, have been socialized to overperform, to go above and beyond, to do what we need to do because we have to work extra work, right? And I think, just based on the education rates, I think that Black women are the most highest educated group. I think there's been a trend over the last 5 to 10 years, have the most buying power, have the highest rates, the highest rates of advanced degrees. So Black women have internalized this, and I just believe by and large are magical, right? Like magical in all of the sense. And so I think that it takes a strong person, like we say, real, recognize real, to be able to say, oh my God, I feel like a Black woman who's magical. I aspire to be like it. I appreciate it. I want to be close to it because they're better than me. I want to let it challenge me, right? I think that is a very healthy response to what I think I'm hearing in her question. And I do think that because of white toxicity and even sometimes internalized whiteness or internalized racism and jealousy, people will have the opposite response, where they will feel intimidated, they will feel jealous, they will feel, like they're in a competition to create influence. I think, which is part of what I want to talk to about, how do we manage white toxicity? I think it's important to be able to name it, right, to her, to be able to recognize it and name it, to determine who does it belong to. When I say who does it belong to, people's insecurity and their projection onto you is not yours to manage, right? But when we start to believe it's ours to manage, then it's like, okay, I feel like you may be getting into, I don't want to shrink myself, I don't want to lose myself, I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. Well, it's not your discomfort to manage, it's theirs. And that certainly doesn't take away the feeling, that certainly doesn't take away the fear that comes from it, but it helps if we can be able to name and disentangle, is this mine or is it theirs, right? So is it their information?
I can't carry this, it is not mine.
I can't carry it, it's not mine. And I think that would be my reaction to, the young lady who posed the question, whose is it to carry? I think that the burden of it and managing it may be more difficult. I will oversimplify it, but I think it's important for us to recognize, like, when you, first of all, excellence exposes mediocrity. I believe that. And when you are showing up as yourself and being excellent and it's exposing somebody's deficits of their mediocrity, I think there's supposed to be a reaction to that. And we have to decide whose is it to carry. Is it ours or is it theirs? I don't know. Add anything to that?
I think you summed it up. If you're at work doing your thing and you're killing it, people. If Cat Williams said, if you don't have haters, you're not doing it right.
Hello.
You're not doing it right. So keep doing you. Keep focusing on yourself.
I really hope that helps. I hope that helps you, because it's not easy and it's not a space. And I think we live in a world that especially towards Black women, will have those negative sentiments. So to your question, I want to give us something, because we talked about white toxicity, we talked about the impact of it physiologically, psychologically. I want to give us some tips to center our mental health as Black folks and navigate it, okay? Before we move to the last nerve. So melanin and mental health, if y'all not following melanin and mental health, I strongly encourage you to. They are Black and brown folks who are centering the mental health of Black and brown folks. And they gave some really good tips about dealing with racist terrorism, which I think is basically a form of white toxicity. The first one is to recognize when gaslighting, whitewashing, white niceness is occurring. We've given you 3 examples of that, right? So to be able to recognize it and name it, and usually our emotions give us some indicators that something is off. And if we were to lean into it as opposed to dismiss it, we can, number one, recognize it. So that is one tool to managing white toxicity and its impact. Recognize when it's happening and name it. 2, connect with people who affirm, validate, and celebrate your existence. So when people want to gaslight you, and I would say even to the young lady who posed this question, surround yourself with people who are not intimidated or jealous by your excellence, but affirm it and lift it up and celebrate it. Because we don't need to feel like we need to explain and justify our human experience that actually creates more toxicity in front of us. So surround yourself with people who celebrate you, who get it, who acknowledge the impact, and you don't have to explain it. Okay? So we want to name it and we want to connect with people who affirm. Process your emotions. Right? When we say process, we're talking about acknowledging the emotion and letting yourself move through it. When my coworkers asked me today, how you feeling? LaWanda, I said rage. And everybody gonna feel it until I don't feel it.
Yep. Yeah. Avoidance is not good for you. Avoidance is not good for you. It might feel decent in the short term, but long term avoidance is not going to solve your problem. So I just wanted to add that to what you said because you make a really good point.
You have to process the emotions, move through them. They take as long as they take to process them, but process them. Because usually we very rarely experience one emotion at
Yep.
We experience that. There's 3 more things. I want to engage in at least one activity that helps you feel empowered, not disempowered, not oppressed, but feel empowered. That could be boxing, that could be exercising, that could be sex, that could be painting, that could be a web show, a podcast. Engage in something that makes you feel empowered. Then engage in at least one activity that gives you joy, and I would add pleasure, right? Whether that's talking shit about white toxicity, whether that's watching your favorite show, coloring, having your cocktail, inspiration. Engage in something that gives you joy, and then finally rest and recharge, y'all. We have to take a break. The toxicity in and of itself eats away and it's poisonous, so we have to be able to rest and take a break from that. So those are 6 tips to managing white toxicity in the workplace. It is pervasive.
I'm going to try these myself this week. Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. I went on my rant about white toxicity. I hope it was helpful.
You haven't even gone on your rant. You haven't even gone on your official rant yet, though.
I haven't. Thank you. Okay, here we go. So this brings us to our last segment of the show, y'all, and this is the last nerve, and perhaps my favorite. I'm going to get my timer together because I'm about to go in.
Give yourself 90 seconds. Don't give yourself 60. Give yourself 90.
All right, 90 seconds of the last nerve. Let me tell y'all what my last nerve is today. Here we go. My last nerve is the toxicness of whiteness and its inability to be able to look at itself in the mirror so that it can deal with its own shit. Okay? Whiteness and all of its toxicity is so coddled in these great United States of America that it is constantly externalizing, constantly not validating, constantly looking for reasons to blame other people for its shit. Okay? I.e., I got a sex addiction, so I shoot up people. I.e., I'm having a bad day, so I kill people and I take lives. And I'm over it. I need for y'all to sit down, look yourself in the mirror, and deal with your bullshit and stop making people the victim of your toxicness. People don't deserve it. People do not deserve to be victims of your toxicity. You are lethal. You are toxic, and you eat away at people's psyche. You eat away at their mental health and well-being. You rob them of their fundamental experience of moving through this world to do all that God has created them to do because you are toxic and are unaware and won't deal with your shit. And I'm sick of it. Deal with your shit. Stop externalizing. Stop getting caught up in guilt. Stop making excuses. Take your ass to therapy and deal with your shit.
Do better.
Do better. Do better. Do better.
Do better.
And there go my time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Y'all, that has been the break room. We have talked about how the body keeps the score. I hope y'all have found something helpful from it. We will, please do better. We will be reconvening next week, and we're going to talk about when toxic is too toxic.
Yes.
Next week's topic. When toxic is too toxic. So y'all join us again. Same time, same place. Thank you.
I'll be safe. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hill.